What's poppin', world? Back at it again with another video. Yeah, once again we got a controversial discussion that we gotta talk about this morning. Y'all ready to title? Without further ado, let's get right into it. Y'all seen it. The story of two Americas, right? And I'ma just preface this. This ain't I woke up today and just want to be race baiting or try to play the race card or just trying to play on the anti-status quo. Like I'm trying to pick a side. The only side I'm standing with is the truth. You feel me? I'm not with one way or the other because I know it's a spectrum and on each end it's an extreme. You feel me? It's either you're being totally dismissive of it or you're sensationalizing the hyper sensationalizing it to where the message, the actual message gets lost, right? So we're gonna go ahead and discuss this. I mean, if there's people that aren't aware and stuff like that, I'm just here to enlighten you, at least from my vantage point. You feel me? Everybody has their point of view, their opinion, and it's a nuanced, multi-layered conversation, right? This might be a somewhat of a long video, but I'm gonna try to just get through all the very small, not like small as in insignificant, but the extra details to get to the source of this video, right? So, story of two Americas. Now, probably don't have to revisit the origin of this country and what it was founded on, but I'm gonna just summarize it by, okay, racism, and it's probably masqueraded by classism, right? So it's racism but classism because it's not to sit up there and say all white people had money, right? Or all people of the majority had money. They have their own hierarchy as well, right? On a financial standpoint, but I will say that in a legality, or a judicial aspect, is definitely black and white, figuratively and literally, right? So not to get too historical, but as far as like the Civil War and what was it really about, it's so nuanced and multi-layered. I just want to get down to what's going on in the modern times and how do we get here and where are we at and where things could possibly go. So if you look at like a lot of these police brutality, I don't even want to call it brutality because sometimes it's flat out murder. I'm just keeping on it with y'all. I ain't finna even play them word games like that with y'all. Y'all can see with y'all own eyes. Some of the stuff is honestly unbelievable. But here's the awareness I'm trying to bring out of this whole video, right? Because like I said, it's on a spectrum, right? So you have some black people that haven't experienced racism, right? Now there's different forms of racism. There's the name calling, the name calling, like the surface level racism. I feel like all cultures have some form of racism, you feel me? Like some form of prejudice or stereotypical because you're not in that culture to fully understand. So that's just kind of human nature. If it's a culture that I see and the one thing that they're best at, I'm a most identified, I'm just gonna generalize them as a whole. Not to say that they're all like that, So I just say all that to say is that not all black people is experienced like true racism. You feel me? Like people been poked at and picked on and stuff like that, or make fun of. Like that's still harmful, but I'm talking about on a grand scale, as far as like there's two kind of housing markets, there's two kind of judicial systems, there's two kind of perceptions when it come down to life in general, as a black person. And I'm not gonna be so caught up in my own experience and my own anecdotal impact and look at it like it's in the medium mild side of exposure to racism. So I'm not even gonna sit up there and act as if um, I've been fully exposed to it, and I'm self-aware to acknowledge and realize that. Um, this is where you get, the quote unquote Uncle Toms, the coons, the shucking and jiving. And I don't want to say quote unquote like I'm trying to be dismissive of it. It's just for how they're portrayed in the message, what they represent. Sometimes they're being weaponized outside of their own understanding, right? So unknowingly, a person to be put in a certain position and have this complex like they're the better black person, right? Maybe because they have things that translate into different cultures, right? So maybe you're articulative, maybe you're intelligent, maybe you have a certain class and decorum, maybe you was brought up within a certain value system that translates to other cultures in a respective manner. So in a sense, you look at yourself as a higher grade black person on the hierarchy of the culture. But in a sense, a person is not realizing that they're now be weaponized, and this is why I say weaponized, as a gatekeeper, right? You're not a gatekeeper keeping other black people at bay, because then now you're saying, oh no, you need to be like me because of look where I'm at and look at the results I have, right? That becomes very dangerous, because then you're pushing an agenda that's has a wider range than I feel like the naked eye can pick up. And I'll give you maybe an off the top example of this, right? So say as if I'm a black guy, I'm raised in a and I'm just generalizing. I'm just giving you the stereotypical outcome. I'm not saying always. And I know the always. I grew up like that, and that's not I'm not talking about you. I'm talking about generally how these outcomes play out. So if you're a black guy, 2-parent household, grew up in the burbs, you're in a white predominantly, school that you go to. You go to a white predominantly college. You have white friends, and I'm just generally speaking. I'm not saying all white people, but let's just be adults here and keep the context of this conversation in its rightful place, right? So you have all these beneficial influences, right, on a societal standpoint, but maybe you lack in the culture aspect, meaning that you don't talk with a certain slang, you don't got a certain swag, you don't have a certain kind of energy towards you, right? So when you get around other black people, there's a discomfort, right? Because black people, we have a very confrontational way of filling each other out and identifying each other. That's just, I'm not sure if it's through the struggle. I'm not sure if that's just the realness that we have, the upfront, bold, unapologetic. Like, I'm not saying all black people carry this kind of nature, but generally speaking, we kind of feel each other out and we kind of interact with each other just on a energy level, So if there's a disconnect, then typically, maybe more so, probably than not, there might be a form of resentment, right? So now you're the token black guy because you fit more in with a different culture due to your upbringing than the people that have the same hue as you, right? So then as you grow older, you may develop a complex thinking that black people are associated with ghetto and hood and gangster and thugs and criminals and all these preconceived misconceptions, and I'm not gonna sit up there and say there isn't a little truth in a lie, I'm not gonna play the nuance game, but I do feel like it's definitely blown out of proportion to where innocent black people that's just trying to live a day to day gets pegged as a certain kind of person, and that's where when you in these kind of people encounter the police, they get treated with a certain way just because I feel like it's propaganda. You know, you look at some of the movies that we have, some of our most historic, epic movies that we glorify. I feel like when other cultures digest and digest and process that kind of optics with each other or amongst themselves, they then now internalize that, and now they see Menace to Society, they see Friday and Friday After Next, they see Baby Boy, they see Boys in the Hood, A Menace to Society. They see all these films, and then they attach that and they peg everyday black people that may not grow up in the hood or an impoverished, disenfranchised situation, and maybe they're not an inner city person. Maybe they're just a everyday, American citizen, but they now, when they encounter the police, we gotta teach our kids, all right, 10 to 2, which is like, if you're looking at a clock, 10 to 2 is where you place your hands on the steering wheel, windows down, lights on, and I would even take it a step further to have your license, registration, and proof of insurance possibly sitting in the passenger seat, so you ain't even gotta make somebody suspicious by reaching in your glove compartment. You feel me? Just having these precautions, and it's sad to sit up there and say that just because we have so many examples of things going wrong just due to these cops not having the mental fortitude. Like, this is what you signed up for. Your life is on the line, and people are paying their tax money for you to do this service. You feel me? And I feel like when you take the taxpayer and weaponize their taxes against them, you feel me? It's like, why pay taxes? Why pay taxes if this is gonna be the detriment, to my existences in this country? Forget inflation, forget the economy, forget all these pillars to this country, if the number one thing I'm worrying about is thinking that if I can make it to the next day to experience these things, right? So you got that aspect where, and like I said, it's a multi-layered, nuanced conversation that I feel like lots of different people can add in different points of views and perspectives, and it's subjective and objective at the same time. Some things you can't deny, and some things are just depending on what perspective or what angle you're coming in at, right? So the story of two Americas, like when you look at the civil rights movement, you look at like Rosa Parks and when things were segregated, there are things that is not as bad as it used to be, but they just found a different way to hide it. If you look at slavery, then segregation, then desegregation, there's always how can I say, they just find it. They changed the rules. It's the same house. They just decorate it differently so the optics may seem different. And I'm not just saying all white people are racist. I'm not saying all black people are oppressed or marginalized. And I'm not saying that. We're just talking about a general conversation, about what happens more than not. I'm not saying white people don't experience police brutality or, things of that nature. I'm not saying that white people, there's not a single white person that's got a bad deal in the judicial system, and I'm not saying that, right? But that's the people that like to take a anecdotal individual 1 percentile example and then have that as an argument to try to challenge what transpires more so times than not. I don't like people like that. Well, what about this? Right? You're always changing the subject. You're always spinning the narrative just because statistically, and if we want to based off what is generality based off of, is statistics. What happens more than not? That means that there's more so problems than solutions. And honestly, like I said, when you look at the civil rights movement, the whole reason why Martin Luther King and Malcolm X was there, two different approaches fighting for the same thing, which was to empower black people, not to empower by depowering other races and stuff like that, but just all the things that wasn't recorded, all the things that wasn't documented, because there was a harder way to record these kind of situations and instances, in comparison to today. And I feel like it now further validates what was transpiring in the past, because we have all this technology and stuff and it's still happening anyway, right? So imagine all the things that weren't talked about, weren't seen, things that were swept up under the rug. And it's just a culture where, like I said, and like I said, I don't want to make this too much of a negative conversation, even though it's transpiring about negative situations. I'm a solution-based person, right? Am I expecting a perfect society where everybody holding hands and everybody treating everybody equally the same? Generally speaking, no. I'm gonna be real with y'all. That's probably not gonna happen to that level. I mean, I know idealistically it sounds good, but there's just always gonna be somebody that's wanna get in the way of others, right? For their own bias, their own personal gain, fair or unfair. That's just human nature. That's life. You can't really. I feel like it'd be naive for a person to not act like that doesn't exist. My whole thing, right, is I don't want, and I'm just gonna keep it 100 with y'all. I just don't want for things to be misplaced or out of hand, or what I don't like most, right? You got the oligarchs or the people that has the invisible hand. What I don't like, what I feel like is more detrimental than even the people that has the most influence and impact, or the gatekeepers, the ones that I mentioned before, the people that are in position to fight for the people that the people that can infiltrate and beat the game from inside the game, but they yet instead weaponize the game and push an agenda. And that's why the term sellout is so prominent, right? You sold your people out for a certain position, and it comes down to a morality and an integrity and a principle conversation, right? Because when you have those certain things instilled within you, there are going to be certain situations to where you can't be bought, because that's what those things are there for, right? It's something that makes you who you are. You can't quantify it. You feel me? It's not something that you would want to compromise for monetary gain, because you're giving a piece of yourself that should be worth more than money. But to each his own. I'm not gonna sit up there and tell somebody on how to live and how to go about what they do or what they don't do. But just like with every decision, I'll leave it at this, right? Every decision has a action to a reaction, an outcome to whatever income, right? So I just want to know your thoughts. I might do a part 2 on this video. Comment, like, subscribe. More videos on the way. I'm up out of here.